Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Solve Your Compliance Puzzle with PSD2 Enabler, brought to you by Asseco. My name is Robert Mihalik. I will be your host, working as a Solution Sales Manager at Asseco. And as you know, Asseco is one of the leading providers in terms of revenue from software services and a top player in banking in Southeastern Europe. Today's topic, well, in short, Payment Service Directive 2, it's live. If you have seen the media in the last couple of days, now it's even formally accepted by the Journal of the European Commission. So maybe you've read the regulation, maybe you've allocated your rough compliance budget, and maybe you're still struggling how to best streamline your PSD2 activities and put all the pieces of a solution together. So we are here to try to help out, so don't agonize. We will share with you what we found in the final PSD2 RTS, and also we can help you out in consulting or a comprehensive solution that covers the PSD2 from end to end. Before we get started, I like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. If this is the first one that you are attending, this is actually a third in a row done by Asseco with the topic of PSD2. The participants' microphones are on mute to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening to the webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane in the WebEx application. And you may send in your questions during all time of this presentation. We will, finalize this presentation with a Q&A session at today of the presentation. Also, I would like to introduce the, main speaker of today's webinar, Alexander Milosevic, who is our Chief Software Architect at Asseco Southeast Europe and the go-to guy for all the PSD2 Enabler questions, consultancy, pretty much the person that understands very well what the PSD2 will require. We will get to ATSA in a short time. As a short introduction, we see there is a different kind of participants today. Some of you we know, some of you maybe you don't know about Asseco. Today, Asseco is one of the vendors focusing on banking software as one of the main lines of business. We have in the Southeast Europe region more than 180 banks in our client network. 4 of those countries and a lot of those customers are in EU, so heavily impacted as well with PSD2 regulation. From the portfolio and knowledge that we have in Asseco, we are covering pretty much end-to-end banking operations from the omnichannel sales and servicing, banking operations, risk compliance, business support. So how you would say from the core banking to the customer touch point, somewhere we do business, and this is usually the knowledge that we can share also in the processes of regulation. Of course, PSD2 being the newest one, but we have seen regulations coming in and new business models for the years we are operating with our customers so far. So to maybe introduce Payment Service Directive 2 compliance in a nutshell, trying to, show you a graphical example of what does it mean of the new rules for the third-party provider, which can be, of course, a bank, or it can be, fintech startup or a new entrance to the financial services market, like, maybe a telco company. In this short diagram, you can see the customer, who is the owner of the account and the account data. And this customer would like, for example, to ask for a third-party provider to get access to his or her account data, to maybe even open payment initiation consent to this provider. The third-party provider will ask the bank that owns the customer data or the customer accounts to provide access to these services according to the PSD2 regulation. Of course, how this bank will, to some extent, authorize and consent the customer, this can be done on the integration level of the interfaces, where the owner of the account bank will be doing the strong customer authentication of the customer and the consent log. Or, for example, in an adapted customer interface, where the third-party provider and the bank will do some integration on the touch point of the application of the customer. But in short, what does it mean? For example, me as a customer, if I have accounts in 4 banks in my country, in the EU, I would like to see all my financial institution information in one interface, in one provider. Is it a bank or another service provider? And for example, execute the payments from different accounts from a single view as a customer. So this is what the PSD2 wants to achieve in form of a customer view. But what does it mean for the business? There is a nice research analysis done by Accenture, for example, on the UK market, UK being one of the advanced markets in financial services internationally, basically, but for sure also in European Union. This graph shows how it's impacting the revenue of payments. So there is organic growth happening already in the last couple of years, and still projected for, let's say, the period until 2020. And the main impacts on the revenue for the traditional payment providers or the financial institutions is, of course, the cap on interchange fees that was, let's say, introduced in 2015 and happening, of course, a lot on the payment initiation. But also they are mentioning digital disruptors like new payment providers in the market over the top coming from international big players. And also payment initiation service providers that might stand in the middle of the customer and the financial service provider that is holding the customer data in their account. So Accenture believes that this introduction of PSD2, or also the openness of the interfaces and the banking and the financial services market will also have some disruption on the revenue part of the traditional payment providers if they do not, let's say, adapt to the new environment. So what is infected with the PSD2? Well, we believe it's some sort of a disruption disguised as regulation. So you can look at it as a new regulation that will also only bring headache and additional work. And probably some of you here today are because you would like to hear in a plastic way what parts of your IT or business will be affected. But it's also an opportunity for those banks that will want to use the new regulation to open up, to even introduce new business model, new partnerships with third-party providers. The impact on banks' business, for sure, will be the cost of the compliance, because PSD2 is not something that you will volunteer. Everybody needs to comply to this regulation. It will affect the loss of card transaction fees if such transactions will go down, of course, and be moved to payment initiation service providers. And of course, the loss of quality of customer interactions, since the mandatory login to your internet banking or another way to interact to your branch will not be the case anymore. So new service providers that will probably focus a lot on the customer experience, on the improving or adding additional value to the standard or traditional data of the customer will probably come between you as a financial institution today and your customers that want to do their banking or that want to do their payments. Of course, there is a lot of impact on the IT systems. For example, strong customer authentication, or SEE, means that new PSD2, depending on the country, of course, will impose higher security than what is being done in strong customer authentication today in some of the European countries. It means also exposing APIs for third-party provider access, so something that today a bank doesn't have to think about. Something like providing a sandbox for those third-party providers to try out the system to make sure that the interaction and integration are solid. Monitoring and keeping service level agreements, and reporting fraud and incidents. So PSD2 does open up banking, but still a lot of the reputational risk and also the reputational cost will stay with the financial institutions. So it will require a high security and tight integration between all the parties involved to make sure that the system is safe as it was so far. But other than the impact and, let's say, the regulatory aspect, the banks with the PSD2 and what it brings will bring some challenges in how to stay relevant for the customers, how to push the digital transformation of the bank's businesses to compete with the new players in the market. So we believe by introducing banks as account initiation service providers or payment initiation service providers, can be the ones actually that will disrupt this area or stay competitive. And also, we with our customers are now in a lot of projects of digital transformation. That's not only changing the IT of the bank, but it's also basically rethinking how the business is being done and how the employees of the bank are addressing such issues. From a regulatory timeline, I've actually seen some regulators also on this webinar, so I hope they can confirm what I'm saying. But 2 days ago, we've seen the official journal of the European Union publishing the Commission delegated regulation of PSD2. So this date is 13th of March 2018. Now we have 18 months from this date, or from the day after, from yesterday, to be compliant also with the final regulatory technical standards, which are now adopted and published by the European Commission. So we are talking from a timeline point of view, something that's also quite important if you are planning a project or thinking about PSD2. September 2019 is the date where we should be compliant also with PSD2, and that, of course, the national regulators will follow this date as well. How we addressed PSD2, because the regulation itself is, let's say, on the higher level, making sure that there is openness to the banking. We also are working with the Berlin Group, which is, it seems to us, emerging as broadly supported PSD2 standard, so going one level lower and to more concrete standardization of the interaction between players and APIs in this let's say, new regulatory window. We are actively supporting this initiative. Our APIs that we are offering, which you will see later on by ATSA, will be out-of-box compliant to what the next Gen PSD2 regulatory draft, or let's say regulatory standard by Berlin Group says, and you can have a look at their document. It's also published on their website. So we believe that the approach with Berlin Group will bring some clarity and some level of increasing the operability of the PSD2 APIs per country. And I've seen that a lot of the national banking associations actually are part of the same standardization bodies. So we hope that this will be to some extent the same. About Alexander Milosevic, who will be your main host today. He is our chief software architect in banking, doing this for a long time. Have seen different kinds of standardization so far, contributed to the Berlin Group specification with market comments. He's heading the API standardization efforts in Asseco. Also participated with more than 70 projects with different banks and let's say from core banking, e-banking to security systems, and also writing an e-book that will try to demystify the PSD2 in technical terms. But not to introduce him anymore, I would like to now let ATSA talk about what we do in PSD2 and how you can make sure that that PSD2 will not be such an agonizing experience as well. Alexander, can you hear us?
Yes. Let me just share my screen.
Yeah.
I hope everybody can see my screen. Hello, everyone.
Yes, we can see.
And welcome today to this third in a row webinar from Asseco, and the one that we are going to go in more details in how Asseco responds to this regulation. We have been in contact with our customers and giving them our view on this PSD2 regulation and our guidance in this sense. But this is the first time that we are actually presenting our concrete response in a form of package. We call it Asseco PSD2 Enabler solution. And as such, this is a set of pre-integrated components from 4 of our top products in digital enablement sphere, and these products contributed their own components to the package, from developer portal to API gateway, identity and access, and API Sandbox coming from Digital Edge Hub, to mobile token and store authentication coming from Asseco SEE product that some of you may use already in production, and also Inact contributed as a product fraud monitoring component that's necessary to meet all the regulations. Our approach to this is both holistic and pragmatic. Holistic in the sense that we did not want to leave banks with a partial solution, offering only a piece of the puzzle. We wanted to see how can we cover as much as possible of the requirements that are, of course, software and IT related, not those that are probably process or business or legal requirements. So we focused on the impact of each of the PSD2 regulation articles and also RTS articles and specific ways those impact systems, and then we trace those requirements to specific solutions that we have in our portfolio. We optimize this in one package, and now we are presenting this as a way to reach the full compliance. But beyond compliance, on the right-hand side, you can see the 4 more components in our portfolio. Digital Edge mobile banking and Digital Edge web banking can be used by banks to for their digital transformation efforts and initiatives, and have been used by banks that are fully online, fully digital without branches, so that have all of their business processes exposed and with customers over online direct channels. But also later this year, we are, as a part of Digital Edge release, we are also releasing XSP module for Digital Edge that will enable banks to play as ASP or PASP and aggregate accounts from different banks in their own user experience and going beyond compliance and keeping customers within their own controlled environment. We are also offering, and this has been implemented in several banks so far, a rich set of Asseco REST reference APIs that go well beyond what's mandated by PSD2. If you take PSD2 standards like Berlin Group or STEP or Polish APIs, you will see that it varies between 10 to 15 endpoints. This Asseco set of APIs has roughly between 350 and 370 endpoints. That is much wider surface to be used for all the digital initiatives and partnerships and the building ecosystems with banks. So these are all already defined and used in practice, proven RESTful APIs that we can also offer as a part of solutions that go beyond compliance. But let's focus today on this part on the left-hand side, how to pragmatically solve this compliance puzzle and see how banks can, in a cost-effective manner, really put a check mark on PSD2 regulation. So in those PSD2 directive documents and also RTS documents, there are different areas of requirements. Some of them talk about dedicated interface for different players, different PSPs that are in contact with bank, about necessity of consent, strong customer authentication, and some exemptions explicitly ruled in the regulations, secure communication between the participants, and then more about monitoring of transactions and monitoring of the risk, reporting the incidents and reporting the fraud rates, providing the facilities for PSPs to test APIs before they go into production endpoints, and of course documenting everything and exposing SLA information. So both monitoring SLA and also exposing this information to third-party providers of TPPs. So you can see how our components of our package map to these requirements, and each of these components has something to do and cover some area of the requirements. Of course, these 8 components are coming from 4 proven products in the area of digital enablement. So we are actually optimizing and combining these products in this package. So we are offering specific licenses that are again catered for the package itself. Products are pre-integrated and have aligned deployment and delivery approach for PSD2. So based on this approach, we can say that full compliance with all the relevant PSD2 compliant requirements can be met with this product. This also enables lower cost of compliance and less risk in integrations because we come with a pre-integrated package as a vendor that has dealt with this kind of projects and before. And also we see that this lowers the effort on the bank side also to deliver this regulation and deliver compliance for this regulation, and also shortens the time for implementation. So let's drill into the biggest area, I would say probably the biggest challenge, and this is exposing access to accounts and see how this can be met with these solutions. And before we go into specific solutions, I wanted you to take a notice of this English word overkill that actually explains when something goes beyond what is required and is not, or when something is not suitable for a given purpose. And as an example, if you have a wooden fence, you would not use plastic explosives to tear down this wooden fence. When we try to make an analog of this in PSD2 regulation world, it would be for 7 API endpoints that we need to expose to access to accounts. Do we really need full-blown API management platform? I think this is also an overkill, and the reason why we have this as a topic today on this presentation is because the AP management vendors that used to be ESB, many of them ESB vendors of the past, have very aggressive marketing for last even years, probably even longer, year and a half, regarding PSD2, and they are trying to explain that everybody who takes this AP management platform pill is going to be okay with PSD2. In reality, it's just one area of the requirements that occur with this, but also this approach of having a PET API platform is also not welcomed by independent technology consultants like ThoughtWorks that are actually judging this over-ambitious API gateway as an anti-pattern and something that banks should hold with and proceed with caution if they decide to go, because of the bad practices of the past, where you would have one single component in your architecture that you would place too much logic, and this would then become a pain to maintain and move forward in the future. So this is regarding this issue of AP management platform marketing, and then when you take a simple thing like payment initiation, let's see how those components work together to actually provide this. So payment initiation starts from payment service user instructing his PASP to initiate some form of payment order. So it could be done as a part of the checkout process at a retailer like Amazon, or it could be done directly with TPP application. And but either way, at some point, PASP has to initiate this payment at some endpoint of API endpoint for this purpose. Let's say this is billing group payments endpoint, payment initiation endpoint, and the first component that gets touched in this process is API gateway, that then receives this, does all the necessary checks of TPP identity according to ETSI certificates, and according to makes appropriate call to validate TPP status at PRETA or some other directory, and then passes this further to billing group specific facade or plugins that handles this specific operation. This facade then orchestrates as a plugin to gateway, orchestrates the transaction monitoring and transaction assessment of the risk of the transaction with front monitoring component, and if everything is within the bounds, let's say it's a yellow, not a red, no reason to block a transaction, then transaction would go through exemption checking, and if there is no reason to exempt this transaction according to those specific rules in regulation to exempt transaction from strong customer authentication, we will need to apply one of the flows for strong customer authentication, and this happens with the strong authentication component and involving possibly mobile token or some hardware token in the picture. So after all this is done and the transaction is confirmed, a core connector component is involved, and this is the component that maps the Berlin Group specific payloads and the way this interface is designed to core, to interface that's exposed by core banking. And core banking systems and payment systems of the bank already have the capability to initiate payment and return balances and transactions. This is nothing new. Otherwise, existing e-banking and mobile banking would not work. So mapping and transforming and adapting is the job of this core connector. After this payment is initiated, of course, the status trickles down all the way back to API gateway, to TPP application, and to the customers. And this is the, if you would go into details, this is how this looks like in a sequence diagram. All these components are involved, and then, as I said, at the end, status goes back. So let's see, the one component that we mentioned as the first one, it was lightweight API gateway. I mentioned lightweight, and this is in contrast to full-blown API management platform. This is not API management platform. This is what you really need to expose APIs in a secure manner. And these are the features like reverse proxy, traffic control, protection of APIs with OAuth2 token validation, security hardening, of course, appropriate logging, diagnostics and audit logging, endpoints for SLA monitoring, and of course, for those that want to go further and maybe in the future monetize some of the APIs, this lightweight gateway exposes chargeable activity records that can be used as an input for a billing and charging process done somewhere else outside of this. So there are some specific things, and this is why this is more a solution than a tool. If you take some kind of do-it-yourself gateway and the platform, you will have a nice tool, and then you will have to configure and develop based on this tool in order to provide full compliance with Berlin Group API endpoints. What we are doing here, we are providing Berlin Group Facade as a plugin to this gateway that provides full compliance with all the endpoints, hypermedia linking, header handling, and paging and everything according to the Berlin Group rules, but also TPP authentication based on mutual TLS and certificates that are according to ETSI profile for PSD2, signing and everything. Of course, this component also initiates all the strong customer integration flows, decoupled flow, redirect flow, embedded flow that are necessary to handle strong customer authentication. Another component that we mentioned is identity and access, and this is the one that handles consent. I would say this is the best way to, this is the main responsibility, is handling consent, issuing, accepting what's needed and the preferences of the customer when it comes to what's going to be exposed to TPPs in a controlled manner, and then providing protection with the appropriate token handling and issuing tokens for API access for this according to OAuth2 protocol. So beyond what's needed to get to issue a consent for the first time, this component also provides consent revocation mechanism and screens necessary to manage the consent further and probably revoke it in the future. Component also enables linking of second factor credentials, as you can see by this QR code, along with username and password. So third-party solutions used for second-factor authentication integrated with this, or our first-party SXS are included in the identification and authentication of the customer. So one of the challenging flows and in this exposing accounts is how to orchestrate this consent and how these components work together in order to have this flow, unobstructed flow from TPP to bank and back when a consent is given. So let's try to see how this is done with a short demo with our solution. We are having here one TPP application. There is a TPP called iPay, a payment institution that is going to aggregate accounts from different banks and initiate payments on behalf of payment service users. We have some typical web banking solution, and this is based on our digital edge for a fictitious bank called Open Bank. And we are also going to have this Open Bank use mobile token, soft token application for Open Bank in order to provide strong customer authentication. So these are the pieces that you are going to see on the surface. We are going to talk a little bit later what's below the surface from.
So Atta, if I'm a customer of Open Bank. This is where I have my current account, yes, and I will be using iPay to see my account details as in a third-party service provider, correct?
Yes, you're right. So let's see. Let's start with. I'm going to log in here, and you will see my account. So you will see. A second, that's user. Okay, so now you can see accounts that I have with this bank. Multi-currency account with 3 different currencies, right? One of them with very large amounts. And I also have a single currency euro account here with 40,000 euros. And I'm going to, some of these accounts are payments accounts. Some other accounts are not relevant from the PSD2 standpoint. So let's see, I'm registered with the iPay, and iPay also uses some form of identity and access component that lets customers use not only their own credentials and accounts, but also use, let's say, accounts from third-party identity provider like Microsoft. So I'm logged in with my Microsoft account, and I'm going to use this account to access iPay. And when I log in, you can see the blank screen, right? I don't have any accounts right now in this demo application, and let's try and add account in the bank. So as soon as I start this process, I have the option to opt out, to cancel this and opt out. And but I am going to drill a little bit deeper and see what is required by this iPay institution, and they require account name, balance, specific information, then incoming and outgoing transactions for the last 12 months. And this consent is going to be given for 90 days for, let's say, 3 times per day. They are even going below what's legally available, like 4 per day. They need less. So I'm okay with this. And now I'm going to pick a bank that I'm going to connect. Of course, this is this Open Bank that I have account with. And these are all the banks that this TPP or iPay has managed to test integration with. So now I'm being redirected to the Open Bank identity and access to provide this consent, right? And here I have the option to sign in into my bank, to authenticate with my bank with my credentials that I'm being issued by a bank using ID and password. But since this bank uses Asseco's mobile token solution, I'm going to log in with my mobile token and QR code by picking this option called authorize or sign in with QR. So I'm going to pick this here, right? And as soon as I approve this, I'm logged into my application. My identity has been verified thanks to my mobile token application. I'm going to close this, and I can see those accounts that you've seen in this web banking application, and this is the subset of accounts that are relevant for PSD2. So I'm going to pick, right now, I'm going to pick Euros account, and let's say this is the one that I want to right now give consent to, and I'm going to confirm. And since I need to confirm this, I'm also going to use the mobile token application, but this time I received a push message. Let's try resending this again so you can see it better. Okay, so there, the push message was received, and there is a consent confirmation required for me on this. And here it says that payment provider is iPay. This is this account that I'm authorizing. Permissions are here, and calls per day. So basic information. Of course, this can be customized. I confirm this consent, and now I'm immediately redirected back to this application, and now I can see my account at the bank, at TPP application account from bank, and I can see that this is this one that with 40,000 euros. If I go into transactions, I can see the list of transactions that were done from this account. In order for TPP application to show all of this, it had to get the appropriate access token that's linked to consent, and then go to account access endpoints to get balances and transactions. So this is what happened in the background. So let's now switch back to presentation. And so what we just saw. So we saw that consent was initiated. Again, identity and access component identify the users with the help of strong customer authentication and mobile token. They were involved. Of course, fraud monitoring component was assessing the risk in authentication session, and this was a low risk, therefore this authentication went through. Later, when the consent was authorized, again, fraud monitoring was involved. At some point, or multiple times during this demo, core connectors was involved to list accounts that are available for consent, and then later to list to give balance for a specific account that was consented, and also list transactions. So this is what components participated in this. And yeah, this is just to say that you have this flow that starts at TPP and then comes back to a bank and then continues later to TPP. And these specific screens and design of these screens is according to UK Open Banking guidelines for consent, because they did some usability research, and the text and the language and also the way some of these things connect user experience in between bank and iPay are all well thought through in order to provide to increase customer trust and in this experience. So API Sandbox, another component important when you need to onboard developers and third-party providers. Somehow they will have to test these endpoints before they come to production, right? We provide a sandbox with pre-configured endpoints that are compliant with Berlin Group specification. This is out of the box. We also provide preloaded set of fake customers and fake account data for 90 days, and simulation of payment transaction processing. So when you post a payment, it's going to go to a simulator, and accounts will be affected, or balances will be affected on both source and destination account. And of course, you will see this transaction in the list of transactions. So this is a simulation that we provide on. And then we also provide a set of test cases as post-on collections for those TPPs that want to test. And so for this onboarding, typically the TPP comes to developer portal, explores documentation and API catalog available, and then enrolls for some access, register optionally application identity. This is not necessarily according to Berlin Group specification, but for some other specification it could be useful. then tries API Sandbox endpoints. And when they are ready with the testing and the results, they can move further and call production endpoints. So this developer portal is self-service portal that contains all the documentation, again, out of the box, everything that's needed for Berlin Group implementation guidelines, and in the form of both machine-readable API descriptions in form of Open API specification, or formerly known as Swagger, and interactive API console where they can test without coding, having a single line of code. So just formulating the request in the web interface and then calling these endpoints. So core banking connectors are also important piece in reducing the total effort by the bank or by system integrators in order to provide this project. For those that are lucky customers of Asseco with core systems, we provide our core systems Absolute, PUB 2000 and BAPO, all provide connectors that are compliant with this. But for those that have other core systems, we also provided a connector kit where we provide integration flows, graphical mediation flows on WSO2 ESB, our integrator platform, for all the endpoints. So you will start with not with the blank screens and blank integration flows, but with something that already works on Sandbox, and then you just have to map it to your own core banking. We of course provide this integration development service as Asseco, so we can also help with this. So another big area is strong customer authentication. And here Asseco is also known as a vendor with long history of strong customer authentication solutions. So our solution, I would say the biggest difference to other vendors is that we are not locking you in with specific choices of hardware tokens. So we can work with different hardware token vendors like RSA and Vasco Active Identity. And this is a strength of ours. And we also, because this flexibility to choose and pick and migrate and maybe switch your hardware tokens, we also offer our own solution where you need to provide the best possible user experience with least friction. And this is with this either standalone mobile token application, or that of course can be white labeled according to branding of a bank, or with mobile SDK for your existing mobile applications that you deliver to your customers to be integrated within those applications to provide this features and functionality, token functionality within existing applications. So and this application really is following all the hard requirements of strong customer authentication, like cloning protection, so and then independence of the elements through use of runtime application self-protection. Any alteration, detected signs of alteration of the software or the underlying operating system are reported back and of course to the fraud engine. So this is all again pre-integrated, and this was a token that you saw as a part of them. I mentioned fraud monitoring. This is also often overlooked part. Clearly, RTS document asks for a mandatory transaction monitoring, and there is also optional part of transaction risk analysis for those that are advanced in the fraud monitoring capacities that want to have even more strong customer exemptions based on good fraud monitoring capacity of the bank. So what we are offering here is, of course, first all the reporting according to EBA guidelines, everything is included, but also all the mandatory risk factors that are listed in regulation, like geolocation, malware, cases of non-fraud. We are actually reconfiguring this solution with a set of scenarios, known fraud scenarios that are relevant for this, and so you can start right away with this engine. And this is high performance engine proven on the big markets and big processors and big banks. like Turkish banks that work with 50 million cards and customers, and therefore this engine is capable of having high performance real-time assessment of scoring of both authentication and transaction risk. And this is very important. You can in real time block and hold some of the fraud cases that are happening. So our delivery approach, as I said, this is pre-integrated package, pre-configured. If you have, if you say that you are okay with what Belling Group gives you as a starting point, as a compliance, this could be a very quick project. If you need to tailor something, that we have the specific steps either in verifying API security, tailoring definitions with you, and then setting up a standard digital edge hub enact for fraud and SXS and mobile token environments. This setup, thanks to our Docker-based delivery of the whole system, can be both on private clouds, public clouds, and on-premises. And this setup is, I would say, not days of setting up some services, virtual machines. It's just a matter of running up container images that are delivered as a stack.
Just to make it clear, of course, this can be Asseco solutions end-to-end, but also we integrate with third-party ones if it's a third-party transaction monitoring system, customer authentication, or even an API management platform. So we have different approaches based on the actual environment we find at the bank. Yeah,
you're right. And in order to enable this, we are, of course, we are providing predefined interfaces for all those scenarios. So some of these interfaces, if you buy the whole package, you will never see, and you will never deal with this integration, like between strong customer authentication and identity and access, or between strong customer authentication and fraud monitoring. So, but of course, the interfaces are there and they are defined. If you pick a component from third-party component to integrate with this package, this is also possible. So we are also having this optional service, integration development service, to develop some integrations for you. This is also optional as a service. Then we perform end-to-end testing. We can do penetration testing also. We have this service, but we welcome also third-party agencies that would be unpartial in this, and so bank can engage third-party agencies for penetration testing, and then we support go live. We believe that this can be done in 3 to 6 months, depending on the requirements, the level of involvement, and customization. And this is thanks to this, as I said, predefined interfaces. As you can see, you don't actually see all these interfaces that happen in between Asseco PSD2 Enabler components, and this reduces the time and risk of the project. But there are also some other integrations that we already have scenarios for, not only TPP applications calling into gateway and identity and access, but also your online banking applications also have to comply with strong customer authentication. They also may be able to utilize single sign-on according to this component, or if not, they can keep their own credentials and credentials stored here, but have these credentials and this identity provider be used as a part of consent granting process. And of course, any multi-channel and online banking infrastructure will have to participate in fraud monitoring. Your mobile token, your mobile banking will also use this SDK documented interface and developer support to integrate this. So this is and core banking, as I said, this integration with core banking is much easier than this full-blown Belling Group endpoints, because most of the heavy stuff is handled already by API gateway and Belling Group plugin, Belling Group Asset. So things like mapping, hypermedia links, error codes, security verification, message signing verification. So these things are all signed handled here on the left-hand side, so that core connector could be just a simple, give me the balances, here is the payment order, and that's it. So that would be in short what Asseco PSD2 Enabler package has inside. So we are here for any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I've seen some questions during the presentation. I can maybe read them, and also we invite you to ask if you have any more. So first one, maybe we covered this also during the presentation. Does PSD2 also mandate strong authentication on existing e-banking channel?
Yes. This is often overlooked. Although PSD2 talks about dedicated interface and API that needs to be exposed, and this API becomes a new channel. This is not the only channel that has to be actually protected by strong customer authentication. All forms of online payment initiation and also access to account have to be protected in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore,
are there any, if I remember correctly, low risk exemptions defined or not in the final RTS?
Yes, there are many of those. For example, payment between own accounts or low value payments below 30 euros, payments for terminals, unattended terminals. So these are all the exemptions. Of course, we have this exemption engine as a part of the API gateway that has all of these rules, and that these are configurable. So if somebody changes something in the future, like a threshold for a transaction or number of transactions, this is something that you can easily configure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course, this can be used from existing e-banking applications also.
Basically, this covers also the next question that's asking, is this transaction monitoring then mandatory? So I would say it is, yeah, but depends on the risk.
Transaction monitoring is mandatory, and there are parts that are mandatory, parts that are optional. Mandatory part is monitoring risk, all authentication sessions and all payments. And then there is another part that's optional, and this is based on advanced analysis of transaction risk. Banks can also provide additional strong customer authentications that are otherwise not available.
And I see the third question, and we can wrap it up there. What kind of effort do you expect from the bank side? So we've seen that. Maybe you can go back to the slide where it shows how we see a project like this.
Yeah. So we already had these questions as a part of some RFIs, and we responded this as we calculated this based on the assumptions that we provide all the interfaces and that we go with the out-of-the-box solution as much as possible. There is something like 50 man days expected from effort from the bank side.
And the technical business as well, the profile of the customers?
I would say it's 80% technical and 20% business.
Okay. I don't see any other question right now, so maybe we can go to the last slide and pretty much wrap up today's webinar. We would like to do a short summary. I mean, we tried to show you what we do in PSD2. Of course, this is our view, and with our products, how we can help. It was already mentioned, and I believe you got the idea from Mata's presentation, that we tried to go very deep into the PSD2 regulation and to show in a plastic way what it means for the IT and the business of the bank. We believe with this approach, if it's all in one vendor or partnering with a vendor that has such experience, you might reduce the risk of such a project and make sure that in the end, the timeline that is 18 months from today is met, and that the risk of compliance will be let's say mitigated. So the final RTS text is out. We don't expect any more surprises. We try to show you identity and access, strong customer authentication, API gateway, and fraud monitoring as a package of products which can work together or can be only a part of the project. And to wrap it up, we believe our offer with this Berlin Group PSD2 framework can be a good starting point, but of course it will depend on your national regulator and other entities in every national regulation that will define or not define the API standards for PSD2. So you can go to the next slide, I believe. To wrap it up, we would like to thank everybody for your time today. If you have any other questions, you can use our contacts here, and also we would offer to you a free consulting session with Alexander, and also you can receive a complimentary copy of our PSD2 regulatory guidance paper, let's say a nice, concise analysis of PSD2 and the usually asked questions that we see from our customers popping up when we discuss them or in the project that we are already doing, getting ready for PSD2. So once you leave the webinar, we would like you to help us with a small survey. Your feedback would be appreciated to make sure that the next webinar is also or even more beneficial for you. And you will also receive a follow-up email from us next week with a link to a recording of this webinar. Please feel free to share it with your customers or get any refreshing or, let's say, the data about what we showed today. On behalf of Asseco, Atsa and myself, I would like to thank you for joining today and have a great rest of your day.